The bill is set down for second reading and the reports on the treaty examinations are set down for consideration. No bills have been introduced. The House comes to questions for oral answer, and the first question is in the name of Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. What reports has he received on the economy?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance,
Order.
Today the International Monetary Fund released its latest preliminary concluding statement on New Zealand. The report concludes New Zealand's fiscal reduction path strikes the right balance between limiting debt increases while sustaining economic growth. The report says, and I quote, "We regard the planned pace of deficit reduction as striking the right balance between sustaining output growth and limiting public debt growth, and consistent with a policy setting where monetary policy plays a primary role in managing aggregate demand. The benefits of the plan are many."
Supplementary question, Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What does the IMF say are the benefits of the planned reduction in the budget deficit?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
On behalf of the Minister of Finance, the IMF cites 4 benefits. Firstly, it withdraws fiscal stimulus at the right time by making room for the expected increases in private sector and earthquake-related construction spending. Secondly, it reduces pressure on monetary policy. Thirdly, it creates fiscal space to manage increasing age and health-related costs and to cope with negative shocks. And fourthly, it helps raise national savings and reduce the current account deficit. And in answer to the member over there, it was written by the IMF.
Supplementary question, Maggie Barry.
What are the key risks the IMF identifies for the New Zealand economy, and what are the options for managing those risks?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
On behalf of the Minister of Finance, the IMF identifies 2 main near-term risks to the New Zealand economy. These are potential weaknesses or a worsening in the financial conditions in the world economy. The IMF also identifies risk in the New Zealand housing market, noting supply bottlenecks persist and prices remain elevated. The IMF noted New Zealand has room to respond to shocks with its monetary policy, and the level of public debt leaves room for fiscal policy response. The floating New Zealand dollar is also seen as an effective buffer. The IMF also says our fundamentals have improved since the global financial crisis. Household and business balance sheets have strengthened, and banks have reduced their foreign funding and been assisted by a strong growth in deposits and slower growth in credit.
Supplementary question, Maggie Barry.
What does the IMF say about the value of the New Zealand dollar?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance,
Order.
The IMF shares the government's view that the dollar is at a high value, largely because of factors outside our control. In particular, the strength of the New Zealand dollar is determined by the relative weaknesses of other currencies and other economies, many of which are printing money. As it says, if global monetary policy were to become less stimulatory, the exchange rate would likely depreciate over time. The IMF also notes the government's return to surplus is easing pressure on the exchange rate by boosting national savings.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Parker.
Does he agree with the IMF that, quotes, New Zealand has run persistent current account deficits resulting in net external liabilities which are high by international standards? The deficit is expected to widen this year despite relatively strong terms of trade, end quote.
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, yes, and I would note that those were largely due at the previous government when the balance of payments deficit rolled out to over 8% of GDP, and I really think the member should stop this line of questioning because all he does is point out that the opposition are lousy economic managers.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Right Honourable Winston.
The Minister was asked about the future projections, so he cannot surely go back to a former government 4 years ago and think he can get away with it.
Order. He referred to the IMF report which talked about persistent current account deficits over many years. I think the question was adequately addressed. Further supplementaries? Question number 2, Brendan Horan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Education.